There's a kind of love the world loudly applauds, the kind that races fast, feels thrilling, and clutches hard. But heaven writes love stories in quieter ink, not always with dramatic entrances or poetic glances, but with sacred signs that whisper, "I am here." God does not merely bless love from a distance. He steps into it. He shapes it. And when he is at the center of your love story, the evidence is not hidden in passion, but in the holy. Here are 3 clear clues that God is not just near, but central in your unfolding love story. The first clue is not about how you feel, it's about where you're headed. When God authors a love story, it never detours away from him. It leads you closer. Not merely in emotion, but in consecration. You find yourself not just in love with each other, but in awe of him. Prayer is no longer awkward, it becomes the common ground. Worship is not an obligation, it becomes shared oxygen. Conversations don't just hover in the temporal, they taste of the eternal. When God is central, the relationship becomes a pilgrimage. You walk together toward him, and in that walking you discover that love is not just a gift, it is a guide. You may stumble, you may have days where you speak more to each other than to God. But the gravitational pull of your bond is upward, and when love has heaven's gravity, it refuses to let you settle for less than holy. There is a sacred soberness in godly love. You realize this person is not yours to own, but yours to honor. Not yours to control, but yours to serve. You stop asking, how can they fulfill me? And start praying, how can I make them more free to become who God made them to be? When God is at the center, love becomes less about possession and more about preservation. You treat their heart like a garden entrusted to you, one you are responsible to tend, not exploit. You become less worried about how they make you feel and more concerned with how they are growing. And when conflict comes, and it will, your impulse is not retaliation, but reconciliation. You stop winning arguments and start winning peace because you're no longer protecting pride, you're protecting purpose. God-centered love puts a sword through selfishness, and in its place it plants honor. There are seasons where the music stops, where the butterflies vanish, where life tests you with quiet, with waiting, with hardship. But God's presence in your love does not retreat in these moments. Instead, it reveals itself most clearly. If your connection survives, what does not sparkle if it holds under the weight of misunderstanding, illness, distance, or disappointment, then it may be more than mere romance. It may be covenant. Love with God at the center does not disintegrate when the dream delays. It does not falter when words fail. It does not walk away when the glow dims. It remains not because you have the strength, but because something greater is holding you both. You find yourselves believing not just in each other, but in the author who is still writing. And you do not panic at the unfinished parts of your story, because you know the pen is in steady hands. So how do you know God is in the center of your love story? It is not because you never argue. It is not because you are always certain. It is not because you feel daily waves of joy. You know it because your love does not pull you inward but upward. Because your commitment is not built on fleeting comfort but holy calling. Because when all else is stripped away, you both still believe. And not merely in each other, but in him, the one who is not only watching your story, but writing it. True love, when rightly understood, does not shout its presence through pride, nor does it strut in self-glorification. It is not the kind of love that needs to be paraded or posted or constantly affirmed by an audience. True love in its purest and most sacred form makes the soul quiet rather than boastful. It does not enlarge the ego, it dismantles it. For when one is truly in love, they do not think more of themselves, but less. Not because they are devalued, but because they are awestruck by something greater than themselves. They see the other not as a mirror to admire their own reflection, but as a window through which they glimpse something eternal. And in that glimpse, they forget the self for a moment and remember what it means to be small in the presence of something holy. This kind of love leads a person not to ask, what do I deserve, but what can I give? It causes a shift from entitlement to reverence. Suddenly, the posture of the heart changes from clenched fist to open hands. True love makes a person tender, not because they are weak, but because they have learned that strength is not in dominance, but in sacrifice. To truly love is to serve, not to subjugate. It is to be willing to go lower, not to climb higher. It is to consider the needs of the other as weightier than one's own convenience. In this sense, love is the opposite of self-promotion. It is self-forgetfulness wrapped in devotion. When love is real, pride becomes foreign. There is no room for rivalry between two hearts knit by heaven. One does not compete with the other for attention, for applause, or for validation. Rather, each is free to celebrate the other, to elevate the other, to rejoice in the growth and flourishing of the other, even if it means stepping into the shadows. True love rejoices not in being seen, but in seeing. It exalts not in being admired, but in admiring. And this is where its humility becomes radiant, because it seeks nothing for itself, it receives everything it needs. It is satisfied not by possession, but by presence. The soul that loves truly does not feel the need to be constantly right, because it values harmony over triumph. It apologizes freely, forgives quickly, and listens intently. It does not build walls to protect pride, but bridges to pursue peace. Love, in its most divine form, does not inflate the self with arguments, arrogance, or superiority. It is content to be lowly if it means lifting the other. It is willing to go unnoticed if it means the beloved can shine. This love does not seek recognition. It seeks to reflect the grace it has received. The more you love truly, the more you realize how incapable you are of loving well on your own. That realization is not defeat, it is humility. It drives you not into despair, but into dependence. You begin to pray not for your partner to be perfect, but for your heart to remain pure. You stop demanding from love and begin surrendering to it. Love becomes less of a transaction and more of a transformation. It sanctifies as it satisfies, and in that sanctification you are undone not with sorrow, but with reverence. True love teaches you that your greatest role is not to be adored, but to adore rightly. It breaks the illusion that you are the center of your own story. Instead, it introduces you to something beyond the self, something that commands reverence rather than recognition. The one who loves purely cannot remain proud, for they are daily confronted with the beauty of another's soul and the quiet call to serve it well. Every act of true love is a quiet dying to self, a surrender of selfishness, a crucifixion of ego, a bending of the knee to something sacred. So love, when rightly lived, does not leave the self bloated, it leaves it bowed. Not in shame, but in awe. Not in defeat, but in devotion. For in truly loving another, we are led into the mystery of what it means to forget ourselves entirely, and in that forgetting we begin to remember God. There is a kind of love that clings too tightly, that trembles at every silence, that constantly asks for reassurance and proof. It is a restless love, frantic, grasping, always trying to hold tighter for fear of losing what it believes it owns. This love is not rooted in trust, but in fear. It seeks possession more than presence. It turns the beloved into a prize rather than a person. But the love that is centered on God flows from a deeper well. It does not clutch with desperation, but gives with devotion. It does not imprison, but protects. It does not seek control, it seeks to serve. Such love is not a firework that flashes once and fades, but a steady flame that continues to burn when emotions shift, when feelings waver, when seasons. Contract between two self-interests, it is a covenant of mutual surrender anchored in grace. A God-centered love knows how to wait. It does not rush, manipulate, or coerce. It understands that timing is holy and patience is a fruit of love. When insecurity arises, it does not reach for control, but for prayer. When tension appears, it does not weaponize silence, but seeks understanding. Love that serves rather than possesses will confront wounds gently, not exploit them. It will stay not only when it is convenient, but especially when it is costly. It chooses kindness when pride tempts retaliation. It listens when it would rather speak. It kneels when it could stand over. This kind of love finds its model in the one who did not demand to be loved, but gave love freely even unto suffering. It reflects the humility of a Savior who washed the feet of his disciples, knowing that love's power is not in claiming others, but in laying yourself down for them. In this love, sacrifice is not seen as loss, it is worship. The relationship becomes an altar where selfishness is continually laid to rest and where service is offered as a holy gift. Where self-centered love keeps a tally of what is given and received, God-centered love pours out without condition. It does not fear being unseen because it knows that love is not performance but presence. It doesn't hinge its endurance on romance, though romance may flourish within it. Rather, it rests on the deeper vow to love as God loves, patiently, graciously, sacrificially. It refuses to turn the beloved into a possession because it sees them as a soul with a divine purpose, not a character in one's own emotional drama. This love is stable because it is anchored beyond the self. When storms come, it doesn't panic. When misunderstandings occur, it doesn't withdraw affection as a punishment. When distance stretches between the two hearts, it doesn't doubt the whole foundation. It simply continues to serve quietly, faithfully, and sometimes invisibly. It keeps doing the dishes. It keeps praying. It keeps listening. It keeps choosing the other even when emotion is low and energy is spent. That's the difference. It does not love for reward. It loves because it has first been loved by God. Such love knows that the deepest joy is not found in owning someone, but in helping them become all they were created to be. It rejoices not in holding tight, but in cheering from beside them. It does not say, "You are mine," with fear, but "I am yours," with freedom. In this way, a love centered on God is not enslaving, it is liberating. It creates space for both people to grow, even if that growth is painful. It does not bend the other to its will, but bends itself to the will of God, trusting that He who began a good work in both hearts will be faithful to complete it. Love without God at its center always tends toward anxiety, control, and disillusionment. But love rooted in Him learns the art of endurance through service. It becomes less concerned with what it receives and more devoted to what it offers. It knows that to love well is not to possess deeply, but to serve faithfully, quietly, and with joy. The world often sells love as a fleeting emotion, a spark of chemistry, a flutter in the chest when eyes meet or hands touch. It packages love in cinematic moments, roses, laughter, sunset walks, and long stares that promise everything. But sacred love, the kind that heaven ordains and eternity recognizes, rarely begins in such shallow waters, and it certainly cannot survive there. Sacred love is not made of butterflies. It is made of burdens. It is not born in infatuation, but in intention. It does not reach its fullest strength in comfort, but in the crucible of responsibility, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment. Butterflies are fragile. They come and go with ease, stirred by novelty and sensation. But burdens anchor love. They test it, shape it, purify it. They do not always feel romantic, but they make love real. The sacred kind of love looks at another person, not only in their moments of beauty and charm, but in their weakness, their failure, their illness, and their sorrow, and still says, "I will stay." Not because it feels good in that moment, but because it is right. Because love, at its core, is not about what we receive, but what we bear together. When love is sacred, it becomes covenantal. It embraces responsibility with joy, not resentment. It knows that real love will eventually walk through seasons that look nothing like the dreams it started with. There will be grief. There will be waiting. There will be long stretches where the heart feels dry and tired. Sacred love does not escape these valleys, it enters them willingly, knowing that the truest beauty often grows in the hardest soil. This kind of love does not run from hardship, it leans into it. It stands beside hospital beds. It sits through silent dinners. It wipes tears that were never planned for. It shows up when words are gone, when strength is low, when nothing sparkles and everything aches. It stays when others leave. It forgives when it would be easier to walk away. It remembers the vows when the feelings vanish. That is where sacred love thrives, in the hidden, unglamorous places where hearts are quietly shaped by service and suffering. Burden-bearing love doesn't only share pain, it shares purpose. It links arms not just in survival, but in spiritual growth. It helps the other carry the weight of their calling, the heaviness of their history, the weariness of their waiting. Sacred love says, I will carry this with you not just because I love who you are, but because I love who you are becoming. Passion for perseverance. It learns to celebrate not just the highs, but the way God shows up in the lows. It rejoices when the other blooms, and it weeps when they are barren. It becomes a place of refuge, a sanctuary of trust, a steady hand when the storm rages and all else is uncertain. There will still be moments of joy, laughter, lightness, but they are no longer the foundation, they are the fruit. The root of sacred love is not in fleeting feelings, but in the decision to keep loving, keep bearing, keep believing, even when nothing is easy. That is what makes love holy. It is not its ability to thrill, but its willingness to carry. In a world that constantly beckons us to perform, to impress, to be seen, love often becomes another stage upon which the self is glorified. We seek to be admired rather than to adore, to be praised rather than to serve, to be made whole by another rather than to pour ourselves out. The spotlight is tempting. It promises warmth and affirmation. It tells us that love is about what we gain, how we're perceived, how much we are needed, and how central we are to someone else's world. But when God takes the center, the spotlight fades, and in its place, love becomes a mirror one that reflects something far greater than the self. This mirror does not exist to flatter, it exists to reveal. When love is rooted in God, it stops being about self-image, and real love, the God-centered kind, reveals what is real in us, both the beauty and the brokenness. It shows us our impatience, our fears, our tendencies to control, our fragile egos, and yet it doesn't condemn. Instead, it invites growth. In this way, love becomes sanctifying. You are no longer loving just for emotional satisfaction, you are loving with an eye toward holiness. You begin to ask not just what do I want from this, but who am I becoming in this? A spotlight isolates, it draws all eyes to one figure, but a mirror invites both people to look upward, to step back, to see something beyond themselves. Love then becomes not about personal glory, but mutual transformation. It's no longer a matter of showcasing the relationship for the admiration of others or even for self-validation. It's about quietly reflecting God's nature, His patience, His mercy, His steadfastness, His truth. And unlike the spotlight, which demands performance, the mirror requires presence. It asks for authenticity, humility, and vulnerability. This is a hard kind of love because it cannot coexist with ego. It demands that we stop seeking to be the center of someone else's universe and start pointing them to the one who truly is. It asks that we not idolize each other, but intercede for each other. It asks that we not look to our partner to heal what only God can, but instead walk beside them as they are healed by Him. When God is at the center, love becomes less about chemistry and more about covenant. It shifts from being an emotional high to being a holy assignment. In this mirrored love, encouragement is not flattery, but prophecy. We begin to speak into the person who is emerging in Christ, not just the one we see today. We reflect back to them their worth as defined by heaven, not culture. We become reminders to each other of grace, of promise, of truth, especially when the other forgets. This is not about codependence or losing identity. It's about being so rooted in God that your love becomes a testimony of who He is, not who you are trying to be. Spotlight love seeks applause. Mirror love seeks alignment. One feeds the self, the other frees the self. And when we are freed from the need to be everything for someone, we are finally able to love them purely without fear or manipulation. We stop using love as a means to affirm our identity and start living love as an expression of our identity in Christ. This love is not threatened by seasons of silence, by change, or by struggle, because it's not built on appearance, it's built on substance. A relationship centered on God will often be quieter than the world expects. It may not always be dramatic or dazzling, but it will be deep. It will not need constant validation because its worth does not come from the praise of others, but from the peace of God. It will mirror not just affection, but transformation. And in this sacred reflection, we will begin to see less of ourselves and more of Him until love itself becomes a worshipful echo of Hellfeast design. In a culture that glorifies the instant, love is often mistaken for a spark that must always blaze or a thrill that must always excite. But divine love is not fragile like that. It is not a fire that flares fast and dies quickly in the winds of disappointment or difficulty. It is not undone by time, it is defined by it. Time does not erode this love, it enriches it. Time is not the enemy of divine love, but its instrument, like metal in the hands of a master smith. Divine love is placed in the furnace of time to be tempered, purified, and made strong enough to last eternity. At the beginning, even divine love may feel soft, tender, easily bruised. The emotions are fresh, the connection exciting. But real love is not proven in its birth, it is proven in its endurance. Time reveals what emotion cannot. It tests the substance of what has been spoken, and it measures the weight of every vow made in sunshine. The passage of days and years presses upon love, not to break it, but to shape it. For what is divine must be shaped by what is eternal, and eternity always respects the process. Unlike infatuation, divine love is not afraid of repetition or routine. It does not flee from seasons of silence or gray skies. It is not constantly asking to be fed with newness. Instead, it finds beauty in consistency, even when life offers no great spectacle. The thrill of divine love is not in novelty, it is in the quiet recognition of commitment. It is not love that must be rekindled every few months with grand gestures, but one that is fanned daily by the gentle wind of presence. It does not need to be loud to be alive. Time exposes human weakness, but it also uncovers divine grace. When two people walk together in sacred love, time will bring out both the best and worst of them. Flaws surface, wounds emerge, illusions are stripped away. But this is not to destroy love, it is to deepen it. For love that cannot see brokenness and still choose to stay is love not yet complete. Divine love is not shocked by imperfection, it embraces it, tends to it, waits for healing, and chooses again. And with each year, love becomes not less passionate but more profound. It moves from the surface to the soul. Love that endures time is not simply strong, it is wise. It learns to speak less and listen more. It stops demanding and starts discerning. It knows when to hold close and when to give space. It knows that every season will not look the same, and that love may sometimes wear the face of friendship, of patience, of quiet intercession. Time trains divine love to trust the slow work of God, to rest when feelings fluctuate, and to stay rooted when storms arise. It teaches love that growth is often unseen and that the deepest transformation takes time. The world may say that time dulls desire or dims intimacy, but divine love is not driven by surface desire, it is sustained by spiritual intention. Intimacy matures with time. It grows not just from touch, but from trust, from watching someone choose kindness over and over again, from seeing them carry burdens silently, from learning how they pray when no one is watching, from building something together that is invisible yet unshakable. In this kind of love, time adds layers, not limitations. Divine love tempered by time becomes a fortress, not because it is emotionless, but because it has been refined. It has survived disappointment, endured misunderstanding, navigated change. It has bent without breaking. It has lost things and found them again. And in all this, it has grown gentle, not because it is weak, but because it has learned the weight of love. It knows that real love is not measured in grand beginnings, but in faithful endurance. And when divine love matures, it no longer fears time, it welcomes it. For it knows that love is not diminished by years, but distilled by them. Every wrinkle, every scar, every trial walked together becomes a testament to something more eternal than youth or charm. The couple that has walked the long road through deserts and valleys with God in the center carries a glory that the young cannot yet understand. It is the glory of having been kept not just by each other, but by grace, Time did not tire their love. It tempered it, matured it, and made it more holy with every passing day. In a world filled with noise, where love is shouted from rooftops, displayed in curated pictures, and performed on digital stages, holy love moves differently. It does not demand attention. It does not need to be constantly proven, defended, or explained. Holy love speaks, but not through volume. It speaks through stillness. A stillness that carries weight, depth, and reverence. A stillness that reveals its sacredness not by how loudly it announces itself, but by how deeply it abides. Stillness is not silence, nor is it passivity. It is a posture of peace, a kind of presence that does not scramble to impress or cling to control. Holy love is not frantic. It does not live in fear of losing what it cherishes. It does not strive to prove its worth at every moment. Instead, it remains, it rests. It listens, it waits, it creates space not just for words, but for understanding, for breath, for God to dwell in the in-between. In the stillness of holy love, insecurity dissolves. There is no pressure to perform, no striving to be more lovable. You are seen not for your usefulness or perfection, but for your soul. And that seeing is quiet, it is steady. It is not infatuation, it is recognition. The kind of seeing that knows your flaws and fears, yet still leans in with compassion. Holy love does not rush to fill silences with shallow words. It allows them to stretch into sacred space where truth can be felt more than said. Stillness holds because it is anchored. Holy love is not tossed by emotional waves or blown about by shifting moods. It knows how to stand in storms without shouting. It does not retaliate when hurt. It does not demand instant fixes. It does not force conversations before their time. Instead, it waits on God, listens for his whisper, and trusts that some healing happens not through speeches, but through silence shared in trust. In this stillness, love becomes less about solving and more about staying. The world may interpret this quietness as weakness, but it is the opposite. Only strong love can be still. Only love that has surrendered its pride, its need to be right, its hunger for applause, can dwell in the calm. Holy love does not need to fill every moment with noise because it carries the assurance of eternity. It knows it is held by something greater than feelings. It is held by divine presence. In the stillness of holy love, we learn to listen not just to each other, but to God. It is here that hearts are softened, not by force, but by grace. It is in the unspoken prayers, the gentle looks, the long embraces that something deeper than language begins to take root. Holy love does not manipulate. It does not twist words. It does not try to win arguments. It quietly speaks truth in love, not to dominate, but to deliver. It does not shout to be heard. It speaks to be understood. This stillness also creates room for reverence. Holy love knows it is standing on sacred ground. It is not casual, even when it is comfortable. It treats the other as a soul, not a possession. It holds moments with tenderness, not entitlement. It approaches union not as a means of self-fulfillment, but as a sacred responsibility. In stillness, it recognizes that this love is not self-created, it is stewarded. And stewardship demands silence long enough to hear the one who gave it. Holy love also speaks with stillness in moments of tension. When voices rise, holy love lowers its tone. When hearts are raw, holy love does not rush to defend itself, but seeks to understand. It does not need to have the last word. It does not aim to win arguments, but to preserve peace. It absorbs pain without returning it. It holds space when the other needs to withdraw. It prays instead of punishing. It chooses gentleness even when wounded. Over time, this quiet strength becomes a language all its own. A shared look across a room, a hand held in prayer, a morning coffee made without asking, a willingness to sit beside someone in their grief without trying to fix them. This is the still speech of holy love, of a language heaven understands. It is this stillness that holds through the years, through disappointments, through change. Holy love does not fade because it was never loud to begin with. It was never dependent on fireworks, on external validation, or on dramatic declarations. It was built in the quiet, formed in the hidden, strengthened in the waiting. In the end, it is this kind of love that endures not because it overpowers, but because it outlasts. Holy love speaks with stillness, and in that stillness it speaks of God.